Australia, where a thick haze is enveloping Melbourne as smoke from the bushfires shroud the city. The air quality was the worst in the world.
The already crumbling Iran nuclear deal is now in further jeopardy.
New South Wales will declare a state of emergency.
A rocket attack on the Baghdad airport kills Iran's most revered military leader,
Qasem Soleimani, former general in Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
The attack was a U.S. airstrike.
The rest of the world is on edge, concerned about the potential consequences of an Iranian retaliation.
In Victoria, a state of disaster has been declared.
Iran says it will take revenge for the U.S. killing of its most powerful military commander.
Iran's parliament has passed a bill designating all U.S. forces terrorists.
In Australia, officials believe almost 2,000 homes have been destroyed.
Iran has announced that it is rolling back its commitments under the landmark nuclear deal, marking a further and dramatic escalation of tensions in the Middle East.
UK scientists are saying the bushfires in Australia are a warning of what may be to come around the world.
President Trump just tweeted 52 Iranian sites will be hit very fast and very hard if Iran retaliates.
President Trump will address the nation for the very first time since Iran launched those ballistic missiles on U.S. forces.
A passenger plane crashed minutes after takeoff from Tehran.
Chinese authorities have traced a new deadly virus back to this seafood market in the city of Wuhan. They say a new strain of coronavirus originated here and put an entire region on edge.
Iranian officials now admit the military unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian passenger jetliner.
China says the number of people infected by a mysterious respiratory virus has more than tripled over the weekend.
Iran's government trying to contain the fallout over the downing of a passenger plane.
The city of Wuhan has set up stricter measures to stop the virus from spreading even further.
The city at the heart of a public health crisis in China is shutting its public transport network.
A deadly and contagious virus from China has made its way into the U.S.
Officials in China are dealing with a major health crisis, nearly 850 confirmed infections.
Just on Monday, the government raised the alert level to the second highest level that it could be.
The Chinese authorities have imposed a lockdown in the central city of Wuhan.
To the question of whether or not this is controllable, I think the honest answer is we don't know.
Well, the virus has now spread, mainly in China, with more than 8,000 confirmed infections, at least 170 deaths.
If we want trade, friendship, cooperation, reciprocity, we don't need a European Commission. We just hate the European Union. It's as simple as that.
A short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency.
Coronavirus cases are now in 26 countries and territories outside mainland China. Just look at how the virus has exploded. You can see how it increased tenfold in less than a week, at times jumping by 2,000 cases in a single day.
We're no longer a member of the European Union. Marks the point of no return. Once we have left, we are never, ever going back. The greatest moment in the modern history of our great nation.
Now, over 64,000 coronavirus cases now confirmed all around the world.
As the novel coronavirus continues to spread worldwide, there's now increased scrutiny on the public health response and the handling of those infected.
France confirming the first death outside Asia from the virus.
Take a look at a grocery store in Milan. The shelves are bare. The Centers for Disease Control warned that it is possible, even likely, that America will have a general coronavirus outbreak.
The Chinese whistleblower doctor who told the world about the coronavirus in Wuhan has died.
More than 82,000 cases and 2,800 deaths. The number of new cases reported outside of mainland China is now greater than inside.
30,000 people dying each year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. 500,000 people going bankrupt because of medically related debt. This is an absurd system.
The first coronavirus death confirmed in the U.S.
Around the world, there are now more than 100,000 cases.
All of Italy is now on lockdown.
The public health system in that area is stepping towards collapse.
Panic is rippling through the global stock markets as nerves over the coronavirus send shares tumbling.
All public and private sporting events canceled. All public gatherings banned. Only absolutely necessary travel between cities and provinces will be allowed.
The British government is urging people to stay home.
Please stay at home unless you absolutely have to go out.
Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a major stock market sell-off, and today we saw history. The Dow Jones plunged more than 2,000 points. It is the biggest drop in a single day ever.
The World Health Organization says Europe is now the epicenter of the global coronavirus pandemic.
It's a nightmare. We all see it. The stock market dropped the most since the crash of '87.
The coronavirus crisis is changing so fast that these maps can't keep up.
The yield on treasuries went to the lowest ever.
We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States.
The response from the government, businesses, and Wall Street, it's rocked our world. Let's face it, there's no sugarcoating that.
It's another hideous day on Wall Street. Our markets plunging.
World War II, 9/11, and now COVID-19. Major events forcing the New York Stock Exchange to close its floor trading.
Buckingham Palace released a statement earlier today announcing that Prince Charles has tested positive for COVID-19.
In a sense, a wartime president. I mean, that's what we're fighting. We will be invoking the Defense Production Act.
New York's governor reports more than 2,900 confirmed cases. Residents should get ready for a shelter-in-place order.
California Governor Gavin Newsom ordering everyone in the state to stay at home.
Across the world, the coronavirus pandemic has now killed more than 10,000 people.
Business is grinding to a halt as local governments step up efforts to contain the coronavirus.
The Prime Minister has announced the most drastic limits to our lives that the UK has ever seen in living memory.
It's the most serious threat to Americans' health in over a century, and quite likely the greatest risk to America's jobs and prosperity since the Great Depression.
The World Health Organization just said the United States and Europe are now the epicenters of the coronavirus pandemic.
The number of infections worldwide passed 400,000.
Here we are in the midst of the worst economic downturn perhaps since the Great Depression.
A quarter of the world's population is now living under some form of lockdown.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has tested positive for the coronavirus.
A record-shattering 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment last week.
701,000 jobs were lost.
Perhaps a better indicator of the true state of employment is the fact that 10 million people applied for jobless benefits just in the last 2 weeks.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead.
There are now more than 1 million confirmed cases worldwide.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson is tonight in intensive care.
Spain has overtaken Italy in its total number of confirmed coronavirus cases, meaning it is now fighting the second biggest outbreak in the world.
The coronavirus pandemic will cause the worst global economic fallout since the Great Depression.
More than 10% of the American workforce is now unemployed due to closures brought on by this pandemic.
So what you're also seeing in these numbers is maybe around 50% of people in the last 3 weeks suddenly without some form of health insurance too, in the middle of a health pandemic.
The United States has become the first country in the world to record more than 2,000 coronavirus deaths in a single day.
It is somehow unimaginable, unbelievable, that in the most famous city of the richest country in the world, they're digging mass graves.
In the United States, almost 27,000 people have died from COVID-19, making it the country worst affected by the outbreak.
Today, I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization.
You see that drop? You see that line right there? This goes all the way back to the 1940s. Jobs up, jobs down. That's the swing. Never before have we seen anything even close to that.
Oil prices have turned negative.
The price of oil has collapsed to a record low. Today traded as low as minus $40 a barrel. It's the first time the price has turned negative in history.
The US has now recorded more than 1 million COVID-19 cases.
30 million people out of work.
Our mask supply, our N95 respirator supply was completely decimated. We're in deep shit.
China is planning to impose a controversial new national security law on Hong Kong, banning, quote, subversion and separatism.
I just want to say to the international community that this is the end of Hong Kong.
More than 38 million people have now lost their jobs in the United States.
Today, I'm identifying houses of worship as essential places that provide essential services.
Tonight, relations between the U.S. and China may be reaching a new low.
China warning the U.S. against triggering a new Cold War.
China is using last year's pro-democracy protests as an excuse to bring in this new law.
Riot police fired
fired rounds of tear gas at anti-China demonstrators, shot water cannon to further disperse them, and arrested nearly 200. This is Hong Kong's first major protest in the post-pandemic era, likely not its last.
A shocking case of an unarmed African-American man who died after being handcuffed and then pinned to the ground by Minneapolis police.
The U.S. coronavirus death toll now rising above 100,000.
Thousands of people protesting in Minneapolis tonight following the death of an unarmed black man on Monday. Police fired tear gas late today after protesters damaged a police precinct among some other property.
Rioters are burning down Minneapolis.
Overnight, Minneapolis on fire. The streets of Minneapolis exploded in a sea of rage and grief as protesters set their sights on a local police precinct. Officers responded with tear gas.
The third night of protests had been the most violent by far. Rioters breached and burned this evacuated police precinct.
The pandemic continues to take a heavy toll on the nation's workforce. More than 40 million have filed for unemployment benefits since March.
While covering the unrest this morning in Minneapolis, members of a CNN TV crew became part of the story.
You're under arrest.
Okay.
Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Come here right now.
For a fourth night, this city is on edge.
Police last night firing pepper bullets at a TV news crew.
Plenty of time here.
Are you okay?
I'm getting shot! I'm getting...
Okay, Katie, are you okay?
Rubber bullets, it's okay.
It's a marked police vehicle. It appears to drive directly into a barrier where a large number of protesters were gathered. The person who shot this video said the protesters were throwing trash and water bottles at the police vehicle.
Video was upsetting, and I wish the officers hadn't done that, but I also understood that they didn't start the situation. The situation was started by a group of protesters converging on a police vehicle. I'm not going to blame officers who were trying to deal with an absolutely impossible situation. The folks who were converging on that police car did the wrong thing to begin with. They created an untenable situation.
The mayor of the city says the National Guard will be deployed overnight, and a citywide curfew is in effect until 5:30 this morning, their time.
The nation erupted into scenes of chaos, violence, and widespread destruction. Dozens of American cities up in flames after some protests turned into riots.
Penetrating the heart of political power in Washington, D.C., security agents used tear gas to push protesters away from the White House.
I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military. Today, I have strongly recommended to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets.
Curfews are enforced in nearly 40 cities across the United States following the demonstrations.
President Trump is facing widespread condemnation for his handling of the unrest in dozens of American cities.
The President of the United States ordered troops to attack peaceful American citizens by tear gassing them in a public park.
Well, one Australian journalist has suggested it's becoming more dangerous to carry a camera on America's streets than a gun. She was responding to the latest attack on the press. It happened right in front of the White House. This is the moment an Australian TV crew were violently moved. The cameraman was shoved in the face. The reporter was hit with a baton.
Tens of thousands of people have joined anti-racism demonstrations across the UK, despite government appeals for protesters to stay at home because of fears of spreading the coronavirus.
Crowds returned to American streets again today, following yesterday's mass demonstrations. Overnight, it got ugly in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle.
An extraordinary situation in Seattle. Calls for racial justice and turmoil across the country have resulted in a takeover of one part of Seattle.
A stunning moment as protesters take over an entire neighborhood in Seattle. The streets are barricaded. Men with assault rifles stand guard at checkpoints. The zone under occupation is a city within a city. 6 blocks in total. At its center, a police precinct that has been taken over after cops abandoned it to avoid a violent confrontation.
An alarming increase in coronavirus cases across nearly half of the country. Confirmed cases in the U.S. now top 2 million.
Tonight, Beijing is reimposing restrictions in many parts of the city in response to a new cluster of COVID cases.
Seattle is on edge. Protesters showing no signs of leaving this 6-block area after taking it over a week ago.
The pandemic is accelerating. More than 150,000 new cases, the most in a single day so far.
A greater number of Americans have now died from coronavirus than were killed in the First World War.
The U.S. has shattered another record tonight. Nearly 45,000 people diagnosed with coronavirus in the last 24 hours.
Today, the World Health Organization reported more than 10 million people have tested positive for COVID-19.
Intensive care units are full.
Here are Florida's statistics. Saturday brought a new record for a daily number of infections, and the surge in cases brings the total to over 140,000.
China's new national security law for Hong Kong is a done deal, but thousands of anti-government demonstrators and anti-China activists still hit the streets in anger as well as in defiance.
After a day of brazen defiance in a rebellious city refusing to kowtow or to kiss the ring of the emperor, these were the scenes on the streets of Hong Kong tonight. More than 300 arrests all told. Hong Kong now a Chinese police state.
Police in riot gear moved in at dawn, ordering protesters to move out.
Police are moving into the city's autonomous zone.
So I am pleased to inform everyone that Seattle has been liberated.
China's new national security law for Hong Kong has been greeted with protests in the territory and condemnation from the international community.
More than 50,000 people in the U.S. are confirmed to be infected with coronavirus yesterday.
President Trump is taking aim at China, announcing new sanctions on businesses and individuals who help Beijing restrict Hong Kong's autonomy.
Today, I also signed an executive order ending U.S. preferential treatment for Hong Kong.
15,000 new cases. That's a record high for any U.S. state.
Breaking tonight, clashes in Chicago as protesters try to topple a Christopher Columbus statue in Grant Park.
Federal police fired tear gas at protesters in Portland, Oregon, as some of them began disassembling a fence around the federal courthouse.
Now, in the latest evidence of growing tension between Britain and China, the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has announced that the UK is suspending its extradition treaty with Hong Kong.
Relations between the world's two biggest economies are sinking to new lows.
The United States has added 903,000 infections in just 2 weeks.
Tensions are running high between demonstrators and federal agents on the streets of Portland, Oregon. Protesters launched fireworks at a federal courthouse, and agents cleared them out with tear gas.
Portland seeing its 59th straight night of unrest. Police using tear gas on rioters after they bring down a federal courthouse fence.
Federal agents pepper sprayed protesters in Portland. Buildings burned in Seattle. Heavily armed militias marched the streets of Louisville, and in Austin, Texas, a protester was killed.
Will this horrible year never end?